In the summer of 1924, a prospector by the name of Albert Ostman set up camp just before nightfall near the edge of Toba Inlet, nestled deep within the coastal wilderness of British Columbia. As he finished his meal, he looked out over the vast trees and rivers that surrounded him. It was a sight that he had seen many times before, but tonight he couldn't help feel a slight unease with his surroundings. Shortly after finishing his meal, he tucked himself into his sleeping bag and drifted off to sleep. But sometime in the night, something took him. He described waking to the sensation of being carried, still tightly wrapped in his sleeping bag, through a dense forest by something enormous and silent. When the creature finally stopped, it placed him gently on the forest floor, and what he saw around him left him in disbelief. They were all watching him. 4 creatures, which he described as being covered in dark, coarse, thick hair, towered nearly 7 feet above him. Their eyes seemed curious. Ostman later described how he would spend the next 6 days trapped deep within the hidden valley with the creatures. They gave him plants to eat, watched his every move, but never spoke. But he could feel that they were intelligent. They weren't animals, but they weren't human either. Welcome back, spooky souls, to another episode of Let's Talk Spooky. We are officially on week 3 of our Spooky Road Trip edition, and I do want to thank you all for being so patient for this episode. I know it is late, I know we took a bit of hiatus, but we are traveling in a very remote area of British Columbia. Therefore, the reception has been a bit choppy, and I did want to unplug just a little bit on this trip. But we are back, and next week there will be a bonus episode, so look forward for that. If you are new, which I do have a bunch of new followers in the last few weeks, so shout out to you all, and thank you for joining us. Please say hey in the comments and let me know what episode you liked best so far. I love hearing from you guys. Our spooky show delves into haunted history, folklore, and eerie urban legends from all around the world, not just Canada. I am your host, Shauna, and tonight we're going to be heading deep into the Canadian wilderness, beyond the campsites and marked trails, to uncover the lore that lingers between the branches of BC's stunning wilderness. From Sasquatch sightings to lake monsters, Otter Men to serpents of the sea, this episode is all about the dark side of British Columbia's natural beauty. And as I record this, I am internet free in the middle of nowhere, so grab your hiking shoes, your flashlight, and maybe a map for good measure, and let's talk spooky. Tucked at the edge of Western Canada's coast, covered in ancient forest, British Columbia is a place of beauty. Stretching further than the eye can see, with mountains cloaked in mist and lakes so still they even feel untouched by time. If you ask locals here, they'll tell you that the beauty only hides something deeper, something older, and something that may be waiting for you just beyond the trailhead. Long before the name Sasquatch entered pop culture, Indigenous peoples across British Columbia had stories of a hairy, human-like creature that lived deep within the forested mountains of BC. The Chehalis Nation referred to the creature as Sasek, meaning wild man. This is the origin of our modern name Sasquatch. Sasquatch is not just a creature of flesh and blood, though. In many indigenous traditional stories, the Sasquatch is seen as a spiritual being, a guardian of nature, and sometimes even a shapeshifter, capable of moving between the physical and the spiritual world. It's said that only those who are ready spiritually and mentally might encounter one. But stories of Sasquatch don't end in just oral traditions. There has been sightings of this creature all over BC, stories of people who have seen something follow them, something that they can't quite explain. So let's rewind to the 1950s, when a crew of loggers stationed deep within the bush outside Kitimat, BC, isolated for miles from any town, the crew had only each other for company, and the vast untouched forest around them. One night, several of the men were sitting around the campfire when they heard branches snapping and the sound of heavy, deliberate footsteps just at the tree line. At first, the men thought it was an animal or maybe even a coworker playing tricks, but then came the rocks. Fist-sized stones hurled through the darkness, landing near their feet. The men grabbed their tools and lantern and retired to their beds as quickly as possible, slightly shaken, but not fully convinced it wasn't a prank. Then the next morning, they searched the tree line for evidence, and they couldn't find any. There was nothing. There were no tracks, no animal footprints, just silence, and an unsettling feeling between the men. Spooked, they packed up early and vowed that they would never go back. Years later, one of the crew members spoke up about glimpsing a tall figure watching them just before the stones began to be thrown. He had never told the others out of fear and disbelief about what he saw, but he was certain it wasn't human. In late 2003, in Harrison Hot Springs, a region that is proudly calling itself Sasquatch capital of Canada, a woman and her teenage son were camping off the service road, enjoying a much-needed rest after a long day of driving and sightseeing. That night, just past 2 a.m., they were awoken by a deep and chestly howling sound, like no animal they'd ever heard before. Then the footsteps came, heavy, measured, and two-legged, circling their tent, over and over again. They didn't dare move or breathe. When the sound finally stopped, the mother unzipped the tent and found massive footprints in the dewy grass, which looked at least 16 inches long. They reported it to local rangers, who brushed it off as likely bear activity. But the woman and her son were experienced campers, and they knew what a bear looked like, and what it sounded like. The woman said, and I quote, "Bears don't walk like that. Bears don't howl like that either." And finally, the infamous Albert Ostman, who after years of keeping his experience a secret, finally revealed to his family on his deathbed the events of the 6 days he stayed with the Sasquatch, and how by tricking one of them with chewing tobacco, he managed to escape the ordeal unharmed. There are hundreds of more stories like this, from hikers to hunters to park rangers. Some describe glowing eyes, while others massive footprints or guttural whoops and howlings through the trees. Some have been followed as they hiked through the more isolated trails of the area. Some felt watched. But Sasquatch aren't the only creatures that hide deep within the BC forest. Some creatures swim within its waters too. I have to say that I have been sitting out here in my camp chair late at night reading and star watching, and there is something strange about this forest, something that does feel like it's aware of you. But no Sasquatch have come to visit, and honestly, I think I'm okay with that. As we move into the more remote and coastal regions of British Columbia, where the rivers wind like veins through the dense, untamed wilderness, there are stories here that are old. Whispered by the Tlingit Indigenous people, it's a story of the Kushtaka, the land otter. But don't let the name fool you. This isn't a little otter that you might see splashing in the shallows. This is something else. something that wears a human shape, but is not human at all. The Kushtaka is a shapeshifter, part man, part otter, covered in wet fur with piercing eyes and webbed hands. It moves between the sea and the trees, slips through shadowy depths of marshes and riverbanks. And in the Tlingit lore, the Kushtaka is both a trickster and a predator. It mimics the cries of lost children or echoes the voices of friends and loved ones. It wants to draw you off the path. And when it calls to you, it uses a voice of someone you love. And when the victim follows, well, they're never seen again. In some versions, the Kushtaka doesn't kill you, not in the usual sense at least. Instead, it steals your soul and transforms you into one of its kind, forever wandering the rivers, no longer human, but not fully creature either. In one of the elder stories, there was told of a young man who vanished while trapping along the Nass River. Search parties found no footprints, no trail, and no gear, just the sound of someone crying softly near the riverbank, repeating his mother's name. But as the search party followed the voice, it seemed to lead them deeper and deeper into the tree line, but always just ahead, just out of reach. And then they realized that something was leading them away. Terrified, they turned back and gave up the search. And unfortunately, the young man was never found. Some elders say the Kushtaka were once human. Others say they were spirits warning of dangerous waters and to keep people away. All the stories agree on one thing. If you're near the river and you hear someone calling your name from across the water, don't answer, no matter how familiar that voice sounds. Because once you follow it, you'll never come back. One tale from the 1970s tells of a commercial fisherman who was netting in the Shika River just before dusk when a dense fog rolled in. The fog muffled the sound of the river and most of the sounds that surrounded the boat as well, leaving an eerie stillness in the air. Only the sound of the faint boat engine could be heard. And that's when the fisherman heard a voice, someone calling to him from what seemed to be the shoreline, begging for help. He turned towards the sound, and through the fog he could make out the outline of a figure standing at the edge of the bank. Concerned, he began to move the boat in the direction of the figure calling out, in a response to it. But the voice just kept repeating its call for help. And that's when he noticed something about the voice that made him go cold. The fisherman wasn't hearing the voice of a stranger. He was hearing his own voice calling back to him. Startled, he pushed away from the shore and moved the boat back into deeper water. But as he did, he noticed the figure smiling unnaturally at him through the fog, before fully vanishing into the thickness. After some time, the fog thinned and the lights of the harbor came into view. He had told no one at the time because he was unsure of what he witnessed, but the next morning curiosity led him back to the spot. The mud along the riverbank had tracks, not human footprints, but what seemed to be the impressions of an otter, large and pressed deep within the sands of the earth. And they led nowhere. The traditional stories of the Kushtaka say that it lingers near shorelines, riverbanks, and rocky inlets of the Pacific Northwest. In dense fogs, the Shika River, or shadowed coves near Prince Rupert, have the most sightings. Sometimes the footprints are found in the mud, large and webbed, leading nowhere. Other times, it's a voice in the mist that is heard. The fog is where the world blurs, where the safe path disappears, and where you're most likely to lose your way. But as most creatures of folklore, the Kushtaka isn't just a frightening figure. It carries deep meaning as well. To the Tlingit traditional stories, the Otter Man serves as a warning not to wander alone, not to ignore the dangers of the sea, and not to be fooled by what seems familiar. It's a symbol of being caught between worlds. A person taken by them doesn't just die, but doesn't always return fully human either. Their soul is just no longer there. It travels now through the afterlife, trapped, alive, but lost. They're also viewed as tricksters, reminding us that not everything is what it seems. A friendly voice may be filled with deception as well. And the wilderness holds a power beyond our understanding. But at its core, the Kushtaka stories remind listeners that sometimes simple is the most powerful. Respect the land, respect the water, and respect forces you may not be able to see. The forest of British Columbia may belong to the Sasquatch, and foggy inlets may hide the Kushtaka, but it's the sea, deep, cold, and endless, where something entirely different stirs. A creature said to stretch 50 feet or more slides through the black waters of the Salish Sea, a large inlet sea compressed between the waters of British Columbia, Canada, and Washington State, USA. The first stories of a giant sea serpent in these waters don't come from settlers or sailors. They come from the indigenous nations of the coastal regions. Tales are told of a massive serpent-like being as sometimes an omen of disaster, but also a guardian of places. The Haida tells of Washago, a spiritual sea wolf, half killer whale. And in many stories, this being is not simply an animal, but a supernatural force tied to the sea itself. Creatures of warning and power were common before settlers arrived. But when they did in the 1800s, they began to tell their own stories. And those stories of a great serpent, those had a new name. The Cadborosaurus, or Caddy, for short. Sightings became common through the 19th and 20th century by fishermen, ferry passengers, and even naval officers reported seeing something rise out of the waves, long-necked, hump-breaking the surface, and moving against the current like no whale or eel has ever done. One of the more strange reports, though, was from the 1937 whale watching station near Haida claimed that they had found a strange carcass inside a whale's stomach. The remains looked nothing like a fish or seal. Its long body was reptilian in features, and something that should not have been there at all, in their opinion. They photographed it, and they gave it to researchers. However, as I'm sure you can guess, all records simply vanished. There was no research ever published on the carcass. There was those who were connected to the sighting that redacted their stories after the find. So now there's just a photograph and whispers of what might have been. Through the decades, sightings haven't stopped either. Paddlers catch glimpses of long, dark, shadowy movements past their kayaks. Ferry passengers point out wakes on calm waters, moving with the boat, but not fully in sight. And fishermen swear they've seen something rise behind them, only to vanish into the depths of the water. That's no whale. Skeptics say it may be a sturgeon, or an eel, or even a misidentified whale. But those who've seen the creature know that none of those explanations fit. In the 1990s, researchers even tried to catch the creature on film. The project was called Operation Caddy Scan, and it was pretty straightforward. Cameras were placed at different points of the supposed hangouts, and sure enough, in July of 1999, something showed up. The footage ran over 2 minutes and showed a long form swimming its way through the depths of the ocean past the camera, and it didn't match any marine animal that was known. Those who studied it said the movements lined up perfectly with what eyewitnesses described as the Caddy. Of course, skeptics still weren't convinced, but it is one of the stronger pieces of video evidence, and it is still talked about today. Sightings have continued through the 2000s, and in 2006, reports even came near Qualicum Beach and Vancouver of swimmers and fishermen who swore they saw something long and serpent-like moving through the waters. And then in 2010, another unusual encounter took place, this time near the Fraser River, close to where the Salish Sea meets the river. And here's the interesting part. The person who saw it was John Kirk, chair of British Columbia's Scientific Cryptozoology Club. So, not a random passerby, but somebody who had spent years studying the cryptic reports of the area. And he described what he saw as unlike any known fish, eel, or whale. And these aren't just isolated events either. Cryptozoologists say that there's about 10 sightings every year of the creature, many from experienced mariners who know the difference between a seal, a sturgeon, and a wave or shadow. They insist that they saw something that maybe just wasn't documented yet. So whether it's a case of mistaken identity or something truly undiscovered, stories keep resurfacing, much like the creature itself. I was able to walk the shores of Qualicum and Tofino. I watched as the beach disappeared through thick fog and the sun set over the ocean. There is beauty in the vast emptiness of this place. Oceans that surround Vancouver Island are vast, and I'm sure they're full of things that we've not discovered yet. But again, unfortunately, I did not see a sea monster, but I did see a few whales, which was pretty awesome, so not a total loss. If you are local and you're listening and you've seen something in the waters, I would love to hear about those encounters. So email us at letstalkspookypodcast@gmail.com with your stories. And if you have any other local stories, do share them. So tonight, we've wandered deep into the forest of British Columbia, where shadows move between the trees and the footsteps echo without a source. We've stood in the misty shorelines, listening to voices in the fog that weren't ours to hear. And finally, we've looked out over the endless surface of the sea, wondering what coils just beneath the waves, and what's just out of view in the tree line. That brings us to the end of tonight's episode. British Columbia is vast, wild, and full of stories that remind us just how thin the line between the unknown truly is. I was lucky enough to explore some of the most beautiful locations, and I feel the depth of age that this land holds. If you have your own eerie encounter, I'd love to hear it. So send us your spooky stories, spooky experiences, or episode ideas at letstalkspookypodcast@gmail.com, or reach out through our socials. You can find our show on Instagram at Let's Talk Spooky, or on TikTok at Let's Talk Spooky Pod. And if you're there, say hi. I'd love to hear from you guys. We do always post extra content, episode updates, and shorts of our spooky reels. And don't forget, if you enjoyed tonight's episode, please follow and subscribe and share. It helps our spooky family grow, and it helps others find our show. Next week's episode is our final haunted road trip episode, and we're covering the creepiest island I ever had the privilege of staying on. We'll be exploring haunted Vancouver Island and all the restless spirits that linger in lighthouses, theaters, forests, and beaches. So until next time, stay curious, stay safe, and stay spooky. This episode was written and produced by me, Shauna. All links to information can be found in the show notes.